Thank you both so much for being here. I met both of you during a defining moment in Los Angeles. It was a few years ago during COVID, and you had turned Dodger Stadium into a testing facility. And what you guys did there was incredible. You stayed to the end, and I know this because my own elderly father got his vaccination there. And you stepped in a moment when the government couldn't step in as much as they would have wanted to. And we're now at another moment when the government is stepping back even further, you could say. In the last few days, the top FEMA chief resigned. EPA reportedly drafted a plan to end its ability to fight climate change, and the White House continues to gut weather science and disaster response. So Anne, I want to ask you, how is CORE stepping in to fill the void? And Sean, what is your reaction to all of this?
Sure. Is this one working? Yeah. Look, when certain things happen, let's say in the political aspect of our experience with disasters and so on, they may be not the challenge that you had hoped for, or the resources that you had hoped for, but you go by, it's the one that you got. This is not to say that one might not separately have an activist position to work on behalf of the thing, regaining supports that have been pulled or things like that. But our job remains the same in some ways, and our job is, in particular when it comes to this kind of government response, the best funded, most prepared government agency or any organization will never be enough to do the amount of work that these kinds of very they're unpredictable in how they play out, not necessarily unpredictable in what happens, but events, whether it's a storm or in a conflict zone or fires or whatever it is. And so what we're always looking for to begin with are partnerships, whether those partnerships are with grassroots organizations that are already working on the ground in the areas where we work, or significantly government. And so, I just sort of correct a little bit the nice words that you said coming into it, in that, with the Los Angeles Fire Department, did we together do Dodger Stadium and a lot of the other testing sites. And it was this, it's kind of that, when we're able to find trust and cooperation with extremely well-trained, LA Fire is an extraordinary organization. You're able to gap fill for them because they can say what they're missing, and they're in that game every day. And so then we look to see how we can fill that gap, and we'll continue to do that. Again, some of the challenges you're talking about, the cuts that have been made, the utter recklessness and cynicism of what's happened that way, it doesn't really answer the questions related to CORE for me to address that. They're related to CORE. It's the same job. And we'll hope, we fight every day to make it as resourced as possible in good times and bad.
In so many ways, it is so much of what we've been doing, right? We've been a scrappy organization for a very long time. We haven't been like one of these big organizations that gets tons of funding. We're not a household name. We've been able to manage to take what we have and build on what is already in these places, as Sean was saying, these communities, the infrastructure that's there, the churches, the community groups, the neighborhoods, and build on that, because that's unchangeable. That's always gonna be there. FEMA and the current situation that we're seeing does make it much harder for us to plan. Some of these things you can plan. It should be about planning and preparedness. But we've gotten 30% of our funding cut because of this. Imagine with fewer resources, without the expertise of places like NOAA and the expertise of people who have been doing this work, and a system that we've been so accustomed to kind of plugging into, where we see each other in so many disasters. You have the same agents working for FEMA and all these places that we're like, hey, we know each other, we know how to work together. It's so much easier to kind of know what to expect when there is so much chaos around you and you're trying to provide some level of calm, security, and some peace to people who are suffering. So it's going to make our job so much harder, and it's frustrating. But as Sean said, it doesn't change how we work. It's actually, I think, drawing on the things that we've been able to hone over these last 15 years that we've been around of figure this shit out. We've got to cobble the pieces together, see what's working, and almost patchwork what we know is available, what's good, what's working, and then connect the dots.
A 30% cut is remarkable. So how do you decide where you want to go and what you want to do? And maybe if you can take me back to January 7th, for example. 10:30 a.m., the fires break out in the Palisades, and they keep spreading and they keep spreading. Where were both of you when that happened? What were you texting each other? When is the moment the decision is made? We are going to activate, we're going to cover this, we're going to provide resources here. What is the litmus test for CORE, whether it's the LA fires or another disaster?
The first text was, are you okay in your house? Because Sean lives in Malibu in such a fire-prone area, and the last big fires that came, I mean, it was right in his backyard. So that was, I think, the first text that we had around the fires. And then, of course, sort of, you know, the teams and the materials that we knew we were going to need to get around the table to respond to this. Jerome, our president, who's here as well, was like, this is going to be a big response. I'm seeing it, you know, we need to get ready for this. And how we decide on these things is sort of a joint planning and gut feeling that we get from a lot of text messages, from us watching what's happening. We have teams that are tracking, you know, the fires and the hurricanes, as well as general emergencies around the world about what is about to get really, really spicy. And we generally talk to each other and say, this is the one that we need to respond to, because it's a factor of, do we have the resources that can strategically make a difference and have partners on the ground, you know, whether it's local government, the government, or organizations that can give us a general sense of what's happening. And then we'll send a team basically to provide immediate materials while they're assessing what are the other next things that we need to be doing.
So you mentioned the fires the last time got very close to Sean's home. Sean, you lost your home in 1993. I lost mine actually in the last fire a few months ago. And I wonder how that changed you as becoming a fire victim. You suggest in the Hollywood Reporter that came out yesterday that it didn't have a negative impact on you. But I wonder how that moment, losing your home, maybe impacts the people you help, and how losing your home maybe made you a better humanitarian, if it did?
Look, I was in a very, in one sense, you know, in the obvious ways, privileged position in the sense that I had fire insurance, and I had, more significantly, that feeling that all of us would have, and some may have had. Perhaps you did when you lost your home. You know, we'll see it in news interviews with people where the final resolve is that when everyone is all right, the family, and you say to yourself, well, you know, what really matters is, well, I had just, for 2 years, and one much more recently, had my first 2 children. And they had just left with their mother to a movie location in Washington, D.C. So I was so in that kind of that's all that matters zone that I never really had another thought other than I felt kind of liberated from a lot of stuff I had. And so I don't think that was a catharsis into being a better person. I think it really, for me, became clear that there was something that, that one could do. We all have whatever personality profile of ourselves, what our needs are to feel like we're participating, in life. And I look for tangible things. I'm very kind of, I guess, purpose-driven in that sense. And when Katrina happened in New Orleans, I was focused on New Orleans in particular. I waited a couple of days, very frustrated, watching the coverage, because I felt like anybody with 2 hands and 2 feet could be of help. But I also had made this assumption that one might be in the way of the authorities that are working in, first responders formally. And then when I saw day after day, that so little was being accomplished and a lot of mayhem was building, I thought, no, I'm going to go. And a couple of us went down, had an airplane take us, and then we couldn't get out of Baton Rouge because they closed the airspace. And we went in. In either case, by the next day, we'd gotten 40 people out of the water. There wasn't a fireman, a policeman, a Coast Guard who said anything but thanks for being here. Everybody was thrilled to have other bodies. Most of them were not people most of them were locals who were doing everything that we were doing. Just helping their neighbors. And so when you see, and we know that sort of notoriously that event was handled miserably on a governmental level. But I thought at that time, when you think of best case scenario, what would have happened here, it wouldn't have been that different. Without those civilians, without other hands, without citizens doing what citizens should do. And so there was something very engaging about that to me, because I always feel like, I think often about people who work with us, and they're humanitarians. I feel much more like a plumber. I don't really want to talk to babies or sick children or their parents. I just want to just tell me what's broken, and we'll see if we can help fix it. And so that sort of led to Haiti in 2010, et cetera.
How can people help you fix it? If we can put up the QR code on the screen, that's where you guys can take a picture. You guys can click on the link up there. How can people help with what you need right now? And what is it that you need right now? Yeah.
Okay. The first thing, I'm not going to do this thing of apologizing for, a lot of times I've done it where you say, it's not only money that we need in terms of support. We goddamn well need money. And then if you want to volunteer or offer a skill set or support in other ways to us, we'll goddamn well take that. And right down the line, because when we get money, and I think it's our strength, I think we're really good at casting from those communities people that are leaders already or that could be built as leaders. And that in doing that, we spend money, I think, very well.
We leave something behind.
We have about a minute left, so if you can quickly tell me, I know a lot about you both. I don't know if everyone knows a lot about both of you as philanthropists, humanitarians. If you can tell me a little bit about Anne, because we know so much about you, Sean, as the actor. It is not the normal thing to start an organization and then basically uplift your partner to equal. The first time I interviewed you, you told me you wouldn't do it unless Anne was going to be there. What does she bring to the organization and to the work? And Anne, if you can tell us a little bit about Sean, not the Hollywood side, But Sean, the humanitarian, what do we not know? And what does he bring to CORE that we may not know?
I'm starting first.
What? You want to go?
I go first.
Okay.
He is so funny and one of the smartest people I know. The biggest heart, so loyal. He, this whole thing about not being a humanitarian and plumber, that's partially true. But if there's anybody in his life, and there's so many people, there is, and you know this, that are not visible, that he has helped. It could be a stranger, it could be somebody he knows, but anybody who he sees in need is that's it. I'm jumping in. And then there's this super, super obsessive side where it's I'm gonna build this. If you look at his hands right now, and thank God that his shoes are clean.
You want to hold them up?
Your shoes are clean. I'm so stoked. And your pants are clean because he spends the majority of his time obsessing and building, and every time you go to his house, it's a new thing, and he's built out this new thing, and obsessive personality that is a perfectionist and a big dreamer, big thinker, and just fun. And the person, unfortunately, he has to hear a lot about my boy troubles and gives the best advice on my love life.
Okay, I'll make it fast. I know everybody's been here a while. So it's 2010, January, and I'm in Haiti. Never been there before. Group of us had started out at a kind of a broken house from the earthquake, and laid our tents and sleeping bags out there and started working right away. We had a lot of medical supplies we brought in that we could distribute. And then we'd see these U.S. military helicopters going overhead and clearly landing quite nearby. So one day I got on the motorcycle, and some of the others got in a car, and we sort of drove under to follow to see what was happening. And there was a deployment of 22,000 U.S. soldiers that had responded in their humanitarian response to the earthquake. And one of the groups of the 82nd Airborne the United States government had leased property, and it was right where the biggest flood of initially 35,000 people had fled on the day of the earthquake to that green space that had been Haiti's only golf course. And it was on a hill. I didn't know how we played golf like that, but it had about a 13, 14-foot wall all the way around it. But in two sections, the wall had fallen in the earthquake. And the people who lived outside there had probably never seen that green space before. They certainly wouldn't have been welcome there. So they fled in. And so I'm guessing if I was 2 days at the other place, this would have been on about day 6 or 7 after the earthquake. And, makeshift tents and all of that. And I talked to the lieutenant colonel and said, we'd we've got resources this way. We have doctors. I brought with me 7 doctors who were volunteering from the United States, and they had a lot of horsepower. We had a couple of rented trucks and a motorcycle, but
Anne comes in the story at some point. Right?
Yeah. See, I said brief, but there is a setup. So anyway, now we're embedded with them, and every night we didn't have the bother of a curfew, so I didn't even know what a 501c3 was at the time. So we would 24 hours be available to the camp, and no light, and rains were like monsoon rains, bellying tents, and big like rapids going down these crevasses. And so then the Lieutenant General, Ken Keene, came to meet me when you saw what was happening, because the monsoon rains come at night. and agreed that we should call a meeting of all the NGOs that were working in camp and get a coordination that was not happening. We had been trying to do that and getting a lot of this. And so we sat down in a circle, and I saw that there was an extra chair that could have been sat in, but the person who was supposed to be sitting in that chair, about 8 of us and the general, was this Korean ice princess who's staring at me the whole time like, what's this fucking actor boy doing here? You know, get his picture taken with a baby with a fly in their eye and go home kind of thing. And by the end of the meeting, because we had the camp, Army Corps was going to present the drainage mitigation plan, and her organization that she was running had the heavy equipment. So we were forced together. And I charmed the shit out of her, made her think I was a serious individual, and then she became my mentor in this whole game. And I ultimately poached her from the UN.
You guys are both remarkable humans. Thank you for everything you do.
It's truly an honor to be here today to recognize these 2 extraordinary individuals that I admire professionally and personally. It's because I've seen firsthand their tireless work that really makes this world a safer, a stronger, and more steadfast. I think to tell the story appropriately, if I can ask you to please come back in time with me 5 years. Go to January 2020, because the Los Angeles City Fire Department that I worked for 20 years was first partnered with CORE at that time. And it was really at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic when Los Angeles was facing one of the greatest public health emergencies in modern history. And it was unprecedented. And I think many people are surprised to learn that the city of Los Angeles doesn't have a Department of Public Health. The county does, but the city doesn't. So the LAFD stepped up to fill that gap. And we began screening, we began testing, we began vaccinating individuals to the best of our ability. But I'll be honest, we were outgunned. This is nothing we had ever had to deal with before, and there was so much uncertainty. There was more questions than there were answers. And you remember all the questions. It's, am I going to get sick? What about my elderly parents? What about my young kids? Are firefighters still going to go to 911 calls? Do I go to the ER? Is there going to be ventilators in there? Does a mask really work? And who can you trust? And we trusted CORE. They moved fast. They managed with strategy. They weren't just there. They knew what they were doing. And most importantly, I'll tell you firsthand, they led with heart. They really, really did. They were right there on the front lines along all of us first responders. CORE showed up each day. Now, if I could ask you now, fast forward 5 more years, same month, January 2025. We all know what happened. It was a different kind of disaster, another unprecedented one. I'm on a federal incident management team, meaning you go anywhere in the nation for the worst of the worst. That was the worst I'd seen. One of the biggest natural disasters in Los Angeles history. And personally, I was deployed to the Palisades Fire for 28 days straight. Needless to say, it was exhausting. Your Los Angeles firefighters could not have fought harder. I'll tell you that. And simply put, that the fire wasn't going to be stopped until the wind stopped. You know, with 100-mile-per-hour winds, I mean, I had the helmet, I'd ratchet on, it would fly off your head if you didn't grab it. It was incredible. We saw homes that turned to ash. We saw neighborhoods that were reduced to a forest of chimneys that I personally walked with Sean and Ann. But amidst all that destruction, of course, who was there with us again? It was CORE. And you saw in that video, you saw Sean and Ann, they didn't just show up. They were there with us. They were side by side. And they told us of what efforts that they were doing, what proactive things they were thinking, and then they would ask, what else can we do? And then they went and did it. So no matter what the emergency is, if it's a mudslide, an earthquake, a hurricane, a wildfire, there's 4 phases to it. And the first is prevention, then you need response, then you need mitigation, and then you have the long tail of recovery afterwards. And that's what makes CORE so different. They don't disappear when the headlines disappear. They move forward into that 4th phase, into that long tail of recovery, and they do it with compassion. They do it with speed, and they do it with staying power. They continue to be there. So whether it's COVID, whether it's going to be wildfires, it's disasters around the globe, CORE meets every crisis with that same fearless determination and commitment to equity. And that's one of the most impressive things that we saw too, because they really went to those underserved communities and they made sure that they were taken care of. They quickly assessed the situation, and then they would deploy an emergency response team, and they'd start to empower those that were affected. And it wasn't just during the crisis. Again, it was during that long tail of recovery that they stuck in it. So today, we don't only just honor Sean, who I view as a friend. I've sat on his couch. I've heard from his soul what he cares about. I answer Ann's phone call on my department cell phone because she's got ideas that will blow you away, and especially if it involves heavy equipment. I'm surprised she didn't roll up here in a Tonka truck. But you know, the entire CORE team, and there's a lot of those members here. I was talking to them backstage. They're absolutely amazing. They have unwavering leadership. They're always moving forward. They're devoting their time and efforts to those communities in crisis. And today has been amazing. I can't, tell you enough how impressive it is to see this audience full of people to be here and to learn. And if you are at all inspired by some of the topics that you've heard today, join in. Join us any way you can. You saw that QR code. You could go to CORE's website. Go to the fire department side, lafd.org. There's a volunteer page. Come hang out. We'll put you to work. But in conclusion, I'd like to just share one last concept, if it's okay. I've been privileged to have been selected on a lot of different incident management teams over the decade, and I remember we had this one very difficult deployment. It was one of those with blood, sweat, and tears, and it was a high and tight team, and the IC, the incident commander, turned towards us, and he goes, he said something that I found profound. It was very simple, but it resonated with me enough that I typed it up, I printed it out, and it's sitting at my desk at LAFD headquarters. And he simply said, the most important person on your team is the one that needs help. And there's a lot of truth to that. That concept is true. It's not just for the incident management team that they were there for us overseeing the disaster, but it's in general. It's something that isn't built in a single moment, right? It's built by people. It's built by people like Sean and Ann who show up again and again and try to help, and they lift other people up, and especially those that need help. I'd like to say now it is just an absolute honor to be able to present the Philanthropic Organization Award of the Year, rightly so, to Sean Penn and Ann Lee.
But before we exit, I do want to, again, congratulate CORE as being named as Philanthropic Organization of the Year. And with all of the incredible work that you do, we've all been touched by CORE in some way. I actually got my first 2 COVID shots at a CORE site at Dodger Stadium. So thank you for that. But on behalf of the Social Impact Fund and our board of directors, I am happy to present a check for $25,000 to CORE in recognition.